All right, video 3. We're going to keep getting through this. All right. So, if your strength does not increase rapidly, we are going to basically everyone adapts at their own pace. It kind of depends on your previous history, depends on your genetics, depends on nutritional factors, sleep or recovery. A lot of things can come into play in terms of your strength improvements. All right. So, essentially, the closer you get to your absolute potential for your genetics, you're not going to have as much, but you can probably expect to get some strength improvements at least initially, and then it's going to slowly and gradually increase over time. There's so many different ways we can manipulate it. We can't even get into this chapter. I recommend taking future exercise science courses, which I'll be teaching or another professor will teach, because then you can really get into the details with it. And it's kind of cool to see what different ways we can build upon and manipulate to go forward with it. Okay. Um, if you're really looking for strength training improvements, we should strength train. The more we probably combine it with aerobic training, the more we may limit ourselves. I think combining strength and aerobic training is fantastic, but there is a limit to what we could or should do, especially if the goal is absolute strength we're trying to gain. Then aerobic training could be a little more detrimental, especially if we're doing a lot of it. Then it could have this interference effect that we could see. All right. And so, improvements really only going to take place in the groups that you train. I mean, that should be pretty obvious, of course, with if I want to get better with my squats, I should squat more, especially under heavy loads, and your body will make that positive adaptation. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we are following proper nutrition, as I highlighted earlier, especially eating a lot more protein. When you are working out, and especially regularly, your body needs more protein needs. So when we ensure that we are getting enough protein, we're going to be good to go. So real quick, kind of just going into maintenance and detraining. Kind of touched on that, with the first video a little bit, but essentially, when you maintain strength with lower volume, the frequency, basically everything we want, if we're trying to have a recovery week, or let's say we're on a vacation or something, and just having a maintenance portion of your strength training routine could help ensure that when you do get back in your routine, you're not going to lose all that progress that you've made. And so you can have something along the lines of, here, I'll move this item right here. Um, we see the left side versus the right side, the regular training versus the deload week. My regular training, just look at the differences. Still keeping, sets the same, but it's much lighter, in terms of the actual weight. So my volume has decreased, but it allows my body to still maintain that progress, but also allow myself to recover. So you're not constantly overstressed because, we've talked about it. Resistance training and aerobic training, it's a positive stress, but it's still a stress. We need to allow for proper recovery. And so while detraining or a deload week isn't 100% necessary for every single person, especially if you are resistance training at a very high level. A deload week will be a good component to adapt, because it can really help ensure that you are recovering, preventing injury, and moving forward with it. Okay. So I won't go through every single one of these studies, you can read it, but there's just a few different ones that showed that, strength and aerobic training, there is conflicting research. Some say that it's positive, some say that it's negative, whether or not it can actually interfere or not. We kind of talked about that. Essentially, what they're saying is that there are positive components when both are utilized, but there is a limit. What that limit is really dependent on the individual, and that's kind of the message that these studies are showing. So if your goals are to strength train over aerobic train, then we need to make the emphasis be more about strength training versus aerobic training. Kind of that simple. And then if it's the opposite, then emphasize more aerobic training. You're trying to get both, then you kind of have to play around with it and see, okay, well, am I seeing improvements in my performance doing this method for a few months, And if not, then we need to change things up. All right. So it just kind of depends on the individual, their adaptations, and what is their current exercise prescription and is it working for them. So stuff we kind of already talked about, but in terms of our muscular endurance, it's important to have muscular endurance in your exercise prescription because we want to make sure that we have the ability to recover between our resistance training, especially when we're training for strength. So if we are doing our one repetition maximum testing for our bench press, but after we try one attempt and we can't do any more because we're done. We spent all this energy because we only worried about strength, not endurance. Our body will not be able to recover as fast. So there is some crossover effect with endurance, power, and strength. So they should be highlighted to a certain extent, and how much again is dependent on the person. I know it kind of stinks that we don't have any definite values, but everyone is so different what they can utilize, and so it's just something that we need to keep in mind. For our exercise prescription, we want to make it specific for the individual. So again, just kind of things what I said, when I have these endurance improvements, we can recover faster and therefore we can apply more strength in between sets, and then maybe we can get that final lift like this individual here is able to do as a result of, yes, countless amounts of power and strength training, but having a little bit of endurance components to allow that recovery is also essential. So while endurance may not be the most important component of an overall, strength training, program, it should be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. And then we have our circuit weight training. All right. This is when we basically, you maybe see this at gyms or anything like that, or any sort of fitness classes where basically you have stations set up where individuals can go to each station and then they can, do whatever exercise prescription we have for that station under a certain time or a certain, number of repetitions, and then they move on to the next station. So it's kind of cool because it does help with our strength, muscular endurance. Could even have an effect on aerobic fitness, depending on what components are outlined for circuit training. But all this really depends on the difficulty, the types of exercise, rest times, etc. So this is just an example: body weight squats, push-ups, dumbbell push press, sit-ups, jump rope, and then a little bit of a water break. Repeat 3 to 4 rounds. Again, very basic, nothing too crazy, but something where we can try to, we get a lot of different components. What's nice is that this is kind of a get in, get out type of method. It's kind of simplistic, and it's great for utilizing it for groups. So definitely a good option, especially if you're looking to become a personal trainer, group fitness instructor. You'll probably do components of this with a lot of the clients that you work with. All right. And, your book likes to kind of refer to calisthenics, as they should be an important part of your resistance training program. And it's just stuff that hits your body weight, squats, push-ups, chin-ups, sit-ups, these core components that, are good functional body movements that we should be utilizing on a regular basis. But again, wherever we fall, if we're doing like 30 push-ups, now we're going more towards the endurance training. Or if we're doing like weighted, very difficult push-ups, maybe like one arm push-ups or something like that. Now, of course, we're developing a little bit more strength. So again, where does it fall under the, the endurance, hypertrophy components of it? Is just kind of up to your prescription, your outline. So yeah, that's basically what calisthenics are. Go forward. With resistance training, stuff we've kind of already talked about before, but there are lots of options when you go to the gym. All right, we have weight training machines. Okay, we have free weights and we have cables and bands. All right, so here I'll stop this one. We'll go into the next lesson.